Oh man, finally I sit down and record this after putting it off for so long. Yep, we're talking about pre-ordering, aka one of the game corporation's best friends. You're not guilty, are you? Why do gamers buy things before they exist, before they know if it will be worth it? Why is this so much more prevalent in video games compared to other industries? For something that's widely and easily available, why are people so set on doing it? Pre-ordering video games is something we've been doing for decades now, and trying to convince people not to at this point is probably futile. But maybe I can change 1, 2, maybe 3 minds if I'm lucky. That would be more than enough for me. I just like to put my ideas out there. I've been burned before, and it hurt, but that's not the only reason I've turned against the concept of pre-ordering. There are various reasons why it's nothing but a detriment to the industry and our hobby from a consumer standpoint, which is what I'll be focusing this video on primarily. There are some exceptions, but I'll talk about that later. And I know bringing this up in 2020 is quite late, but it's still relevant and needs to continue to be said for as long as possible. 3 words: Rock Band 4. If you're watching this and are one of the 12 other people who bought this game at launch, you may know what I'm about to get into here. Rock Band is one of my most beloved series, with many good memories and fun times going all the way back to 2007. Naturally, the announcement of this game got me pretty excited, so I decided to order the Band in the Box bundle with all new instruments because while my old instruments were confirmed to work with the new game, they were getting pretty worn out. So what happened? Well, Rock Band 4 was a mess of a game when it first came out, and compared to Rock Band 3, it was a total downgrade in every aspect except for frame rate. No online modes, less options, less customization, less songs, worse songs, latency and bugs with the instruments, sound issues, animation issues, terrible UI, and some of these issues still persist within the game to this day. It's a lot better now, sure, but it took a long time for the game to actually get there. However, even after all this time, it isn't that great, and they had to lock the online features and other things behind a paywall with the Rock Band Rivals expansion, and they were unable to live up to their promise of having all songs from previous games on the 8th gen systems, with the Rock Band network songs still MIA. The game was so poorly received that nobody cared enough to buy the bundles when they came out, and retailers quickly decreased the price to less than half of the MSRP. Not only that, it was one of the reasons why Mad Catz, the game's publisher and manufacturer of the instrument controllers, had to file for bankruptcy in 2017, about a year and a half after it came out. I felt like I had thrown $250 down the drain for this game. Value of the bundle I had bought tanked down to under $100, so I had no recourse other than to hold on to it and hope that it would be worth it in the long run. And unfortunately, it never really got to that point. I did not pre-order games very much before this, as I got into the 7th generation very late, when the 8th generation was right around the corner, so everything was already available. But of course, the one time I dropped $250 on a game prior to launch is the one time I get royally fucked. Go figure.
Last time I gave a shit, I got fucked! Ah!
There was one silver lining to me not getting rid of the bundle though. The instrument ceasing production has made the value skyrocket recently, being around $400 now over 3 years later. I'll chalk that one up to luck though. But this whole debacle wasn't enough to turn me against pre-order culture on its own. I can't remember the exact timeline because I wasn't paying attention at the time, but back around 2013 to around 2015, there were personalities trying to get people to stop pre-ordering video games, or at least be smarter about it. In 2013, one of the biggest releases at the time was Aliens Colonial Marines, which you may remember topped the charts as the highest selling game for several weeks before the game came out. On Steam, a digital-only platform with thousands of games on it. Then, it came out and ended up being an absolute pile of shit compared to the trailers and demo that was shown off for it prior to launch. Basically false advertising. That game really kicked off the idea that, hey, maybe we shouldn't give money to things that aren't confirmed to be worth it. I didn't learn about all this until after I had already been shafted by Rock Band 4, unfortunately. But what really got me thinking hard about this going forward was a video by the late Totalbiscuit called Should You Pre-Order Video Games? That is a rather timeless video in my opinion, and you should watch it if you haven't seen it. 2016 was the year I really started to pay closer attention. It was a year that had a number of disappointing games that made me understand just what he and several others were saying at the time. Final Fantasy XV came out after the controversial 13 trilogy and the absolute dud that was the original Final Fantasy XIV MMO. Yet for some reason, people did not heed those warnings, pre-ordering the game left and right, and then found the game disappointing. So much so that Squeenix had to pretty much redo the entire ending and fix tons of other aspects of the game, then straight up cancel their plans for the last bit of DLC, due to low sales. There was The Division, which I personally don't know all that much about, but I remember people complaining that it didn't live up to the trailers that were released of it at E3, and suffered from some typical MMO-like annoyances that made the realistic-looking game seem quite unrealistic. But you know, it was a AAA shooty Ubisoft game, so you know tons of people bought into it early on. Pokemon Sun and Moon are not exactly bad games, but they do seem to be among the more divisive games in the series. A lot of people, myself included, found it to be one of the most boring entries in the entire series. And of course, since it's Pokemon, tons of people will hop on board right away no matter what. I didn't buy it day one, but I still kinda wish I never bothered. We also saw the release of Mighty No. 9, which almost everyone who played it thought it was one of the most disappointing 2D platformers they had the displeasure of playing, despite being headed by an industry veteran. But not only was this game pre-ordered and hyped up quite a bit, it was also funded by a crowdfunder, meaning people threw money at it before even knowing what the game would actually be like, aside from having similarities to Mega Man.
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
And then there was No Man's Sky. No Man's Sky had tons of red flags and warning signs before it came out, but people pre-ordered that game like crazy too. It was overhyped to the nth degree, there were no playable demos or anything, and the creators were touting features of the game that were very obviously impossible for such inexperienced developers to pull off, especially on an underpowered piece of hardware that was the PlayStation 4. Which is what it was being marketed on the whole time. Everyone agreed that it was the most disappointing game of the year, and possibly one of the most disappointing games of all time. And guess what? I pre-ordered it too, but I had wisened up a bit before that, and didn't fall for the hype train. I knew going into it that it wasn't going to be as good as they were saying, and I had myself a decently good time with it actually. It was still disappointing though, but at least I didn't have any major regrets, right? And last but not least, we have Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Let me be clear though, this game was not bad at all. Not nearly as good as Human Revolution that came before it, but not bad. But prior to release, Square Enix had this bright idea to start this asinine augment your pre-order campaign. A campaign so insane they took pre-order culture to the next level, essentially telling us to pre-order the game because if you don't, and your friends don't, and your friends' friends don't pre-order the game, then your pre-order bonuses won't be as good. So only if they get a certain number of pre-orders, they were just going to withhold in-game content and the other goodies from people who bought the game. It's almost as if they knew the game wasn't as good as the previous one, but tried to use other desperate means to get people to buy it before it became public knowledge. But people actually put their foot down once and said no. Squeenix were forced to rethink the game's launch thankfully, and it ended up coming out normally instead, for the most part. But the fact that Squeenix thought this was acceptable in the first place was both alarming and laughable. Now why am I bringing all this up? Well, if pre-ordering wasn't such an accepted practice in the gaming sphere, it wouldn't be like this. All that stuff I just listed off was just 1 year, and didn't even cover everything. 1 year with so many disappointing high-profile games, false advertising, abusive anti-consumer practices, and this stuff still happens, and people continue to give them money to do it.
Don't ask questions. Just consume product and then get excited for next products.
Pre-ordering a game is tantamount to responding to this comment with, "Yes, oh yes, Master Corporation, whatever you say, I will give you my money as long as you give me product sometime in the future, no matter how bad it is, and I will take all of your abuse every step of the way, Master. Abuse me more, Master. Punch me in the face." Okay, I got a little carried away there. But when you give money to a company like this, you are telling them yes. Whatever they do has your tacit approval. Did they falsely advertise the game in a pre-release trailer, making it look better than it actually is? You approved it. Did they release a broken mess on day one instead of waiting until the game was finished before launch? You approved it. Did they do literally anything abusive, negligent, petty, or manipulative between the second you pre-ordered it and the second it comes out? You approved all of it. And that means that your money, your choice to pre-order a game, contributed to this culture of shady developers and publishers trying to rip people off in the future. You can say you don't support these things and voice your opinion on social media all you want, but your money is more powerful than your words. And that's the only thing corporations listen to. Speak with your wallets, as they say. You don't need to pre-order the game. You don't need to play it on day one either. But if you're so inclined to have no self-control, you can buy it day one and play it day one just as if you had pre-ordered it. Digital games are even more baffling to me. Why is digital pre-ordering even a thing? It's not like digital storefronts will run out of digital copies of the game, right? Oh, fuck, Nintendo, please stop. No! And to make things worse, getting your money back on digital game stores was only made possible when the companies allowed it. Nintendo, for example, wouldn't allow refunds at all until after they got sued over it. And people had to fight Valve for a very long time to get them to allow refunds on Steam. Where they can get away with it, they will try. Stop it. Do not pre-order digital games. It's such an irrational and nonsensical thing to do. It's not like you'll be missing out on anything if you don't pre-order, right? But my pre-order bonuses... Oh, don't get me started on pre-order bonuses. Usually it's just some cosmetic skin that makes no difference in the grand scheme of things. Do you really need that? Do you really need a palette-swapped costume that you will discard as soon as you unlock a different one? Do you really need 25 extra lives in Sonic Lost World? Is some in-game gun skin worth risking getting ripped off by an unfinished or broken game, or supporting companies that falsely advertise their games or do a bunch of shady shit before launch? If the bonuses were physical items, I could understand that a bit more. But is it worth taking the risk for some cheap tat that will have little to no value in the long run? And it wasn't just the game publishers and developers that did these things. Retailers used to have exclusive pre-order bonuses that you could only get from a specific store, meaning if you wanted all the content and bonuses, you had to buy multiple versions of the game. I remember having this headache with the original Hyrule Warriors. I could buy it from Amazon, GameStop, or Best Buy, and get different DLC items from whichever one I bought it from. Ultimately, I decided to just say fuck it, and bought the game from a local game store instead. So I missed out on the DLC, or I had to buy it later. I don't remember. Oh well. No regrets. And that was all before I started paying closer attention to all these things. Oh, yeah. People pre-order consoles too. Don't do that. Launch lineup is usually weak. Like the PS5 and Xbox don't have anything worth buying a $500 system for. Shinier graphics and carefully curated reveal trailer footage should not be enough to convince you. Have some higher standards. Your eagerness to get a PS5 as soon as possible is exactly why you can't order one now. Scalpers see the bullshit hype train these corporations have created and have taken advantage accordingly. Just look at all those videos complaining about how everything is sold out, and everything is up on eBay for ridiculous prices. Have a bit of patience. You don't know what's coming this next generation. They could be planning something to really screw us over down the line for all we know. Remember what Microsoft tried to do with the Xbox One at launch? Just don't. So why do gamers buy things so blindly, so faithfully, when you would never do that for any other industry? Sure, people do it for music, movies, books, and probably many other things. But those are much, much more of an anomaly, while pre-ordering video games is the norm. Are gamers more irrational than the average consumer? I'm inclined to say yes, and not just because of pre-ordering, which is more of a symptom really. Console wars exist after all. Do you see anything similar to that in other industries? I've seen car guys trash each other based on the type of car they like, but that's all in good fun and banter from what I've seen. You may see similar things among different music fan groups, but video game fans are on a whole different level. This is a subject that is worthy of discussing in its own video, and probably delves into psychology that I'm not qualified to even remotely talk about, but it's almost as if gamers have a much more personal connection to their media, which leads them to becoming more excited and hyped more easily. Like it activates a childlike mentality within us when something new and shiny is announced, and we not only have to have it as soon as humanly possible, but also have to justify and defend our actions from the scrutiny of others. It seems strange when you take a bird's eye view of it, doesn't it? Pre-orders benefit the developers and publishers, so that's why they do it. I don't care. Why should you? The only time you should care about anything that benefits the developers or publishers is when those benefits trickle back down to you in some way. Okay, maybe I'll make an exception for when the companies are abusing their employees or some other heinous shit, but that's another topic entirely. Pre-ordering benefits the developer by assuring them that there is interest in their game, and to what degree, so that the publisher has an idea of what the sales numbers will be prior to launch. For those of us who like physical games, this has backfired on us greatly, especially for those of us who can't afford to buy everything new. Sure, pre-ordering a physical copy ensures that you will get one, but it also allows publishers to artificially keep their games' prices as high as possible. All they need to do is look at their pre-order numbers and ship accordingly, and based on projection, they can sell just enough for retailers to not need to cut prices, as well as reduce the number of used copies out there. Nintendo is notorious for creating this sort of artificial scarcity. For example, this kept 2002's Kirby's Return to Dreamland above $50 for over 3 years after launch, until they finally released it digitally for $20. For many 3DS games, their prices remained static for years after launch due to the same practice. More recently, this has negatively affected people who want to play Atelier Ryza, since they apparently only made enough copies to cover pre-orders, maybe a bit extra, and now a game that isn't even a year old is $175 or more on eBay. The same thing happened with PS4's Crystar and Blue Reflection, two games that are vastly overpriced now if you specifically want the North American version, and there are probably plenty more examples out there. This is also partially to do with an unfortunate migration towards buying digital on console. Pre-ordering digitally only benefits the developer in the short term. If we bought it after launch instead, theoretically, they would earn the same amount of money in the long term, but of course, that's not how it plays out, because you may change your mind on the game after launch once you hear what people have to say about it. And speaking of which, let's bring up The Last of Us Part 2, a game that tons of people had pre-ordered for sure, but the entire game got leaked online quite some time before launch, and many people, not liking the direction they took the game, canceled their pre-orders. It just goes to show that pre-ordering is always a gamble regardless of the developer's track record, whereas making an informed post-launch purchase is not. People were angry at The Last of Us Part 2, but what would have happened if it was never leaked and nobody canceled their pre-orders? I think people would have been just as disappointed, but Sony and Naughty Dog would have had the last laugh because they would have already gotten everyone's money regardless. Pre-ordering does benefit the developer, but to the detriment of you. So, you may be wondering, am I still guilty of this? The answer is obvious. Yes. In fact, I've pre-ordered quite a lot of things in just the past 2 years. Here, I'll even list them off for you. And don't worry, this won't take too long and there is a point to be made here. Super Mario 3D All-Stars, physical version. Streets of Rage 4, physical version. Ys Memories of Celceta, Timeless Adventurer Edition. Xenoblade Chronicles, Definitive Edition, Definitive Works Set. La Mulana 1 and 2, Hidden Treasures Edition. Langrisser 1 and 2, Limited Edition. Rune Factory 4 Special, Archival Edition. Atelier Dusk Trilogy, Physical Edition. A Hat in Time, Physical Version. Disgaea 4 Complete Plus, Hell-Raising Edition. Atelier Ryza, Everdarkness and the Secret Hideout, Limited Edition. Legend of Heroes, Trails of Cold Steel 3. Thor's Academy Edition. Gun Gun Pixies, Physical Version. Daemon X Machina, Orbital Limited Edition. Astral Chain, Collector's Edition. Dragon Quest Builders 2, Physical Version. Super Neptunia RPG, Limited Edition. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel Decisive Edition, and The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 2, Relentless Edition. Sidus Alpha, Physical Edition. Fate Extella Link, Fleeting Glory Edition. Demo, Physical Version, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Special Edition, Disgaea 1 Complete, Rose and Queen's Finest Edition. Right, so that's my past 2 years of pre-orders. Quite a lot, isn't it? Okay, maybe not a lot to some crazy rich people out there, but notice a trend? With a couple exceptions, these are all collector's editions and physical versions of games that are limited in some capacity. In other words, if the version of the game I want is one that will not or may not be readily available after launch, I have to pre-order. These could still be considered risky, but usually, unless the game is complete trash when it comes out, these are safer bets because they retain value more than your typical physical game does. Obviously, sometimes you will get this wrong, and there will be plenty of copies out there, but companies aren't exactly transparent with this information. And in this case, it's definitely safer to pre-order it than risk having to pay an exorbitant amount later on, be it from a scalper or just because it becomes rare. And in the case of limited run games and similar storefronts, it's either pre-order or miss out, but you at least have the advantage of already knowing which games are good beforehand, because they are available digitally elsewhere first. So there are exceptions, And the only game on my list this doesn't apply to is Dragon Quest Builders 2, which is the only game I've ever picked up at a midnight release. That game had already been out in Japan for quite a long time before we got it, and it was so good I ended up playing it for over 400 hours. I still didn't need to pre-order it though. Could have just walked into GameStop at release and bought it then. But 1 out of 20 something isn't too bad, I guess. I have some upcoming collector's editions on order too. And just got Mario 3D All-Stars due to it being a limited release. And starting to feel regretful because I probably won't even play it. But hey, since it's a limited release and the price may go up, it's not like it would be an automatic $60 loss if I got it digitally, right? None of these exceptions apply to digital games, again, and I can't stress this enough. Don't pre-order digital games. You're not doing yourself any favors whatsoever. But my preloading! A minor convenience, if you have a decent internet connection. Oh, but it may take longer than it should because consoles throttle their download speeds or their networks are just poor. This is their fault, and they want you to pre-order to sell you a usually non-refundable solution to the problem they created. Is playing the game a few hours or sometimes a few minutes early really that important to you? I have slow internet. I feel the pain of those who want to use preloading to offset the long wait time they'd have to deal with, but to them I'd say just buy the damn physical game, if available. If not, and you can get it on PC, that's a superior option anyway. The download won't take nearly as long. Now, let's touch on a bit of a tricky dilemma. I like to go into games knowing as little as possible, and enjoy and figure things out on my own. I don't even like to read reviews much anymore because they sometimes contain unmarked mild spoilers, or they can spoil the experience by setting expectations. That means the longer I wait before buying a game, the more likely I will happen across something on the internet that does exactly that, or even spoil something important. So if I want to play it before that potentially happens, what do I do other than pre-order and play it right away? Special and limited physical editions aside, you can still get the game day one without pre-ordering, and even if you do play it day one, there's still a chance of getting spoiled before you finish it. It's all to do with how you use social media. There are plenty of tools to use and precautions to take to avoid seeing content, not all of which are foolproof, but still work rather well. If you're part of a fandom for a certain series, take a break from that fandom when a new game comes out. If you're on the Twatter, mute everything relevant to the new game. I'm currently being very selective in who I'm following and what conversations I get into in order to avoid spoilers for Trails of Cold Steel 4, a game that's been out in Japan for 2 years, so spoilers are all over the place. It's been difficult, but I've done pretty well so far, and so can you. Game companies show off a lot of their game before launch now, don't they? Can't I just use that to make a decision? What if there are reviews out before launch? It's true that we do get to see a lot before launch now due to video sharing being so widespread. However, game companies are very selective about what they show and what they want to keep under wraps. It's the same with trailers for movies that get people excited by showing all the good stuff and end up being mediocre or lame. They will show you the gameplay moments that they want you to see, that they think will convince you to buy the game, even if the rest of the game doesn't live up to those moments. As for pre-launch reviews, if a company gave someone the privilege of being able to play the game before everyone else, would you trust that person's opinion? I certainly do not, which is another reason why I don't read reviews anymore. Not only that, if these reviews are not favorable towards the game, companies will stop giving them early access to review their games before launch. It happens all the time, such as how Kotaku lost early access to Bethesda and Ubisoft titles back in the day, or how Angry Joe lost early access to pretty much everything. So of course, early reviews will always skew positive rather than negative. They shouldn't be trusted and shouldn't be used to justify pre-ordering a game, or even buying it at any time. What about crowdfunding? Use your own discretion here. I personally do not give money to any crowdfunders. As a rule, I only put my money towards things exist or will exist, not things that may exist if the people behind it actually do it. That, coupled with all the other issues with pre-ordering I outlined earlier, make crowdfunding video games even more of a gamble. Because even if they do make it, you could get a Star Citizen that doesn't even come out until after you die. Or you could get Mighty Number 9.
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.
Okay, but pre-ordering will get me X deal or X on sale. And you think that will never go on sale again at some point in the future? This is something I usually see with digital games. Sometimes pre-ordering a game will get you a discount on something else, Or sometimes game will launch with a small pre-order discount that goes away on day one. Don't get suckered by this. If they are willing to do this at such a large scale before launch to get as many sales as possible, it may be that they are just overpricing the game to make it look like you were getting a deal, when actually you aren't. Fun fact, that's the embarrassing truth about a lot of sales we see in many other places too, that people fall for all the time. Just wait. Judge the game based on its actual value. On PC especially, things go on sale all the damn time. You'd probably get a better deal just by waiting a bit longer. Okay, but at the end of the day, you still pre-order something, so you're still part of the problem, right? Yeah, probably. There's no denying it. I love my collector's editions. And currently, if I don't pre-order them, there's a good chance I will miss out entirely, or have to pay a scalper a ridiculous amount to get them later on. I guess I can't win either way, huh? Pre-order, or don't get what I want. It's the same for collectibles outside of video games too, though. They are usually available on a limited pre-order basis. I'm currently waiting on them to announce a special edition for the new Hyrule Warriors for the West. But if there is none, then I'll just pick the game up after launch wherever I can. Maybe I'll give a local game shop some love that I've neglected since this goddamned lockdown began. Well, I can't really think of anything else to say about this subject. Pre-order culture has been a blight on this industry for such a long time. I don't think we can do much about it anymore. But hopefully I can help someone see the light. The light of having the lowest of expectations. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ever been royally burned by a game like I have? Do you already avoid pre-ordering but still have exceptions other than the ones I mentioned? Do you pre-order digital games like a brainlet and think you can justify it? Feel free to spam walls of letters in the comments section, and if you think I did a good job explaining why you shouldn't pre-order games, share it with a friend who has a problem. Make this step one of their intervention. Get their expectations low. I got a couple of videos planned based on a certain spin-off game in the pipeline, and I have Trails of Cold Steel 4 coming out next month, which I'll probably make a video or two about as well. So, if you like this video and want to see more like it, you know what to do.
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night.